Well, hello and welcome to our Friday night Bible study. This is for Friday, July 24th. And let me double check that. Yes, 24th, 2026. Yeah, I can see our kitty right over there in the window. So she's asleep in the window seats that we got for the cats. And it allows her to look right out the window and see stuff, although if she's asleep there, which it looks like she is, she's not looking. She's just there where she can enjoy the view when she does wake up. And not a whole lot went on this week except for one thing. I went sort of viral this week over a comment I posted on a YouTube video. Back in the early 70s, I went to school at a place in Colorado, up in the foothills, just a little bit west of Loveland, Colorado. And that's within an hour of Denver. Denver is known as the Mile High City because uh, parts of the city are, in fact, right at that 5,280 foot of elevation mark. And so there's a lot of businesses in the city that are mile high, fill in the blank, whatever they do. And it was at that school that I got my introduction to auto mechanics. And one of the features of working on a car is that sometimes the designers put bolts or nuts in hard to reach places, sometimes so tight that you have to take an end wrench, turn it one way, turn the nut about a twelfth of a turn, turn the end wrench around the other way, turn it another twelfth of a turn, and then sit there and repeat that process back and forth until you get it loose enough to turn by hand. And sometimes, if it's something rusty like an exhaust bolt or nut on an exhaust stud, that can be very difficult to get to, making for a lot of that. And that's kind of frustrating for a mechanic because it's a lot of very detailed work and it slows you down and it's tiring. And when I encountered things like that, I used to say to myself or to anybody standing nearby who would listen, well, that thing was made by the Mile Long Bolt Company. So I happen to be watching a video. There's somebody I like to watch who tears down an engine on video every week. Normally it's an engine. He sometimes does something else. And it's for me, it's interesting because of my interest still in auto mechanics, and I get to learn about new engines and how they're put together and what to do to get them apart, how the stuff works, because the guy is a knowledgeable person. He also has kind of a dry sense of humor. And he was working on an engine last week that had been sitting on his shelf for a couple of years for various reasons. And he got to a nut on an exhaust stud that was so welded that when he went to work on it, the stud came out instead. And it was in a tight space, and he couldn't get to it with his power tools. He had to do it with an end wrench. And he was working at it pretty hard. It wasn't maybe quite as difficult as I described before, but it was difficult for him. And so I posted a comment. That exhaust stud was made by a Denver firm, the Mile Long Bolt Company. And I got notifications from YouTube into Tuesday or Wednesday telling me how many people had liked my comment. In other words, they actually clicked on the like button next to the comment to say that they appreciated, understood, and appreciated the humor. So that was a little something to brighten my week, I guess you could put it that way. Last week, we read through to Isaiah chapter 30, and we also did a sermon presentation. Our sermon presentation was on a story from the book of Acts in chapter 19, the one that we refer to as the Seven Sons of Sceva, a nice alliterative title. Anyway, so we are prepared to pick up at chapter 31 in Isaiah. If we do like we've been doing, we'll get to chapter 35. And chapter 35 is an interesting chapter that often gets read as describing either A, the future when Jesus would be on this earth, or even further forward. We can talk about that when we get there. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and bow our heads and we'll begin our study. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for the opportunity to open the written word and to ponder what it says and to seek through that to draw closer to you and to better understand both you and your character of love, and thus where you want to take us when we trust you. We want to have that connection through this study, so we ask that you will send your Spirit and that each person who hears might receive that gift and thus receive a blessing and useful information from this study. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, and by the way, you may have been aware that my wife kind of hung up early last week. She's not with us at the moment. She might dial in later if she wakes up and hears us, but she's been sound asleep for a couple of hours, probably anyway. So we'll see if she wakes up. If not, we'll proceed apace anyway. And as you can see here, this is chapter 31 in the book of Isaiah, and it's titled in this version, The Futility of Relying on Egypt. And it starts out with what this version uses in place of what the King James translates as woe to. And in fact, let me just double check. I don't know if the NIV uses that language or not. It does. Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help is how it begins. This version says, what sorrow awaits those who look to Egypt for help, trusting their chariots, horses, and charioteers, and depending on the strength of human armies instead of looking to the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. Now, we might in our day and age understand that a little differently than, as we'll see, Isaiah probably understood it. It doesn't make sense to rely on human armies with horses, chariots, and charioteers, or in our day, bombers, battleships, and tanks, instead of looking to the Lord, because those social institutions, shall we say, do not approach life based on the Creator's character and his approach to life. They are essentially instruments of destruction and death, which makes them better aligned with the destroyer rather than with the Creator. Whether or not Isaiah had that kind of understanding when he wrote this, he may have had an inkling of it, but there we'll read some things that suggest he had a slightly different understanding. But the point is that whatever type of human help we seek is likely to lead to problems and ultimately sorrow, Because humans are fundamentally broken. They don't understand God's plan for life. For the most part, humans are not submitted to God, so they can't fix our problems. And be it horses and chariots or modern armies or other human attempts through education or social engineering or whatever else we go about trying to fix our problems, we're doomed to failure because we aren't looking to the Creator. That chapter we read earlier, I think back in like 22 or 23, where it talked about they tried to beef up the city of Jerusalem, and they arranged aqueducts to bring water inside the city where they could withstand a siege. He says, you did all these things, but you didn't look to the one who designed it long ago. And that gives us a sense that God is talking about our lives. We can do all these things trying to fix our lives, but if we don't take regard to the one who designed us long ago, we're doomed to failure, and what sorrow awaits us. Verse 2, in his wisdom, the Lord will send great disaster. Allow, it will happen because that's the natural consequence of living outside of the Creator's design for life. We understand that much. He will not change his mind. He will rise against the wicked and against their helpers. Now, this is leaning toward a portrait of a warrior God who will stand up to destroy our enemies for us. For these Egyptians are mere humans, not God. Their horses are puny flesh, not mighty spirits. When the Lord raises his fist against them, those who help will stumble, and those being helped will fall. They will all fall down and die together. And again, Isaiah writes as if this is God's intent and God's doing, rather than merely the natural consequence of them going about life the way they've chosen to because they believe the lie. But this is what the Lord has told me. When a strong young lion stands growling over a sheep it has killed, it is not frightened by the shouts and noise of a whole crowd of shepherds. That's a very, how shall I put it? It's a visual metaphor, shall we say. It's an image we can put in our minds. It's a story, particularly in the time that Isaiah was writing, that people could relate to. Because the Israelites were primarily agrarian people. They lived off the crops they raised and off the animals that they tended. So the flocks of sheep were a source of both textiles and food. And lions, the big cats, when they came and took an animal, this was something that they worked to defeat. But they would then be very familiar with this scene where a strong young lion kills one of their sheep, and they go out there, but what are they going to do? The sheep's already dead, and they can bang the pots and pans and wave their sticks and their torches and scream and holler, but likely the lion is not going to be frightened. He's armed, he's got teeth and claws and strength and speed. So he's not frightened by the shouts and noise of a whole crowd of shepherds. And then he says, in the same way, the Lord of heaven's armies will come down and fight on Mount Zion. Now, God fights differently than perhaps Isaiah imagined as he wrote this, but the Creator is not frightened by the destroyer or by anything humans can bring in their arrogance against him. The Lord of heaven's armies will hover over Jerusalem and protect it like a bird protecting its nest. He will defend and save the city. He will pass over it and rescue it. Now, this verse 5 here, is very fascinating because we recall what Jesus said in the last week before his crucifixion. And he looked at the city and he said, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who were sent to you, how often I have longed to gather to you together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." So this metaphor that Isaiah used of a bird protecting its nest, Jesus came with the intent of doing exactly that. The thing is, he didn't do it in the way they thought he ought to. They didn't get the kind of protection they were looking for from their broken human perspective. And so Jesus would have to say, "This is what I wanted to do, but I couldn't because you weren't willing." And that also illustrates for us then one of the important principles that we teach in this group, and that is that God has granted us freedom. He will not impose on us something we don't want. Even if it would be better for us to have that something, if we don't want it, he won't make us do it, and we suffer the consequences of not getting that good thing. So the Lord of heaven's armies intended to hover over Jerusalem and protect it like a bird protecting its nest, but ultimately in the end was unable to do so because they were not willing. He will defend and save the city. He will pass over it and rescue it. Though you are such wicked rebels, my people, come and return to the Lord. I know the glorious day will come when each of you will throw away the gold idols and silver images your sinful hands have made. The Assyrians will be destroyed, but not by the swords of men. The sword of God will strike them, and they will panic and flee. The strong young Assyrians will be taken away as captives. Even the strongest will quake with terror, and princes will flee when they see your battle flags, says the Lord, whose fire burns in Zion, whose flame blazes from Jerusalem. That's the end of this chapter. Now, we're going to read, probably next week, we'll get to the historic section of this book, where we'll read the story that we've encountered before of the rescue of Hezekiah from the hand of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria. And so in that case, the Assyrians were destroyed, and we've talked about what was probably the agency of that, and it wasn't by the swords of men. Isaiah calls it the sword of God. And there is, I've run across this recently in some discussions of something that I did way back when I was in college. My senior year of college, I took an Introduction to the New Testament course as one of the required religion classes for my degree. And the professor, someone my dad had known, assigned us a list of texts to write a commentary on, difficult texts from the New Testament. And I picked one from Paul in 1 Corinthians, where he talks about the immoral brother, that he suggests they should remove from their fellowship to indicate that they don't go along with his lifestyle. And he wrote in one verse that they should hand him over to Satan for a period of time. And that text, then, I picked that one to comment on. And I was a German student. For my foreign language, I took German. I took both elementary and intermediate German. I'm not very good at the language. I never really used it much. And, if you don't use something, you essentially use it. So even what grasp of it I had in my intermediate language courses, I don't have anymore. But I thought, I went to the seminary library in order to research this text. And I decided I'd be uh, smart and spiffy and use my knowledge of German and quote from and then translate a German commentary on that particular text. And I found one and I read what it said about the text, and I was able to get the gist of it and give a uh, uh, approximate translation. The way I recall it was, Der Satan kommt zu fragen als Vollstrecker des Willen Gottes. Satan comes into the question as the fulfiller of God's will. And I put that in there, gave that translation, whatever else I put in there. I didn't get an F on the paper, so I passed the class with an A. I don't know what the professor thought of it, or if it made any sense to him, if he even understood why I might go to a German commentary. And he never said anything to me about it. And I don't know, maybe he didn't know what I have since learned. German theologians, and this is probably rooted in Luther's thinking, have taken the position that Satan is sort of God's enforcer, and that God leaves to him certain destructive tasks to fulfill his will. Now, we would take that approach with a bit of skepticism because we don't think destruction is part of God's will. It's something that because he's granted us freedom, he allows to happen. And if that destruction should bring us toward him, he's willing to take advantage of us and receive us to himself. But to say that Satan fulfills God's will, I have a problem with that. But anyway, so when we suggest that the angel that destroyed the Assyrian army, and we'll read about that probably next week, was in fact the destroyer, we are not saying, as would the Germans, that this creature, this being, was fulfilling God's will. However, God already knew it would happen, and as he lifts the curtain to his prophet to warn people about what might happen if they take certain actions, he writes it as if this is God's doing, because that's the only understanding he has available to them. Moving on, chapter 32. Look, a righteous king is coming. Well, this sounds very messianic, doesn't it? And honest princes will rule under him. Each one will be like a shelter from the wind and a refuge from the storm, like streams of water in the desert and the shadow of a great rock in a parched land. I'm going to look up a hymn here because the words of that are largely drawn from this this verse, or at least the words of the chorus are. Okay, look it up by number, and then I can look up the number and I can find it in here, and that way I can read it to you. Give me just a second, I'm almost there. The words for this were written in 1880 by Vernon J. Charlesworth, and about 19 years later, Franklin E. Belden wrote some music for it, and he prepared a refrain. And the words that he uses for the refrain are drawn, at least in part, from this passage. I think you'll find, as I read through the verses, you'll find that. And this poem, and most non-Adventist hymnals will use a different tune. The Adventist hymnals use Belden's tune because he was a prominent Adventist musician and a nephew to Ellen White. Anyway, the poem has a line followed by a second line and a fourth line in each verse that's exactly the same all the way through. A shelter in the time of storm, which is then why the song has that title. The Lord's our rock, in him we hide, secure whatever may betide. A shade by day, defense by night, no fears alarm, no foes affright. The raging floods may round us beat, we find in God a safe retreat. O rock divine, O refuge dear, be thou our helper ever near. And of course, each of those followed by a shelter in the time of storm. And then the refrain that Mr. Belden prepared says, mighty rock in a weary land, cooling shade on the burning sand, faithful guide for the pilgrim band, a shelter in the time of storm. Now I'm thinking there's another hymn about the rock. Of course, there's another Belden hymn where he wrote the words and the music, not far away, we'll build on the rock. That parched land, I'm thinking there's some words that involve a weary land. Well, I'm going to waste a lot of time at that. I don't intend to. So, streams of water in the desert, a refuge from the storm. Then everyone who has eyes will be able to see the truth, and everyone who has ears will be able to hear it. Even the hotheads will be full of sense and understanding. Those who stammer will speak out plainly. In that day, ungodly fools will not be heroes. Scoundrels will not be respected. For fools speak foolishness and make evil plans. They practice ungodliness and spread false teachings about the Lord. They deprive the hungry of food and give no water to the thirsty. The smooth tricks of scoundrels are evil. They plot crooked schemes. They lie to convict the poor, even when the cause of the poor is just. But generous people plan to do what is generous, and they stand firm in their generosity. So It seems as if Isaiah has gotten to this point in his description of this utopian future, and he says everyone will be able to see the truth or hear it and will receive it because the faithful and true witness has spoken it. But then he gets off on these ungodly fools who won't be heroes, and he talks about the problems that they cause in the world. And part of what they do is to look out for self, and therefore they tend to oppress those who are already disadvantaged because they're the easiest ones from which to take to improve your own condition. And you'll notice there in verse 6 about the middle, they practice ungodliness and spread false teachings about the Lord. Now, we're saying that to some extent, even Isaiah spread some false teachings about the Lord because he didn't have a full understanding of God's character. Jesus had not come to earth and revealed it fully yet. And so, the people were wandering in the darkness of this world in what they saw around them. And so they understood God in the terms that their minds could grasp. But false teachings about the Lord are the origin of evil. And it was lies about the character of God that plunged this world into darkness. We've talked about that in the past as we read the stories there in Genesis. So the people lie to convict the poor, even when the cause of the poor is just. But then he says, generous people plan to do what is generous, and they stand firm in their generosity. Listen, you women who lie around in ease. Listen to me, you who are smug. In a short time, just a little more than a year, you careless ones will suddenly begin to care, for your fruit crops will fail and the harvest will never take place. Tremble, you women at ease. Throw off your complacency. Strip off your pretty clothes and put on burlap to show your grief. Beat your breasts in sorrow for your bountiful farms and your fruitful grapevines. For your land will be overgrown with thorns and briars. Your joyful homes and happy towns will be gone. The palace and the city will be deserted, and busy towns will be empty. Wild donkeys will frolic, and flocks will graze in the empty forts and watchtowers. Footnote A, the Ophel is what the Hebrew says there. Until at last the Spirit is poured out on us from heaven, and capitalizing that is the choice of the translators. Then the wilderness will become a fertile field, and the fertile field will yield bountiful crops. Justice will rule in the wilderness, and righteousness in the fertile field. And this righteousness will bring peace. Yes, it will bring quietness and confidence forever. My people will live in safety, quietly at home. They will be at rest. Even if the forest should be destroyed and the city torn down, the Lord will greatly bless his people. Wherever they plant seed, bountiful crops will spring up. Their cattle and donkeys will graze freely. So, verses 9 to 15, Isaiah describes a period of want, destruction. And he says it's going to happen quickly, just a little more than a year. It is possible that he's writing about the siege of Judah by Sennacherib when he besieged and essentially took the cities of Judah. And he had like 2 left that he was working on, and he sent his field commander to go and taunt Jerusalem itself, though apparently he never besieged Jerusalem. He was besieging another city, and that's where his soldiers fell to whatever disaster overtook them. So Isaiah may be writing about that period when Judah almost fell to Sennacherib, when he had defeated most of Judah's walled cities. And in that situation, if the enemy's outside the gates, you don't go out and tend your fields. So you hope you have enough stored up to live on, because so the fruit crops will fail, the harvest doesn't take place, and the people who have been used to living in ease, probably those who managed to get to positions of economic power where they could have other people do the work and then they got the benefit, would have this negativity going on in their lives. But then in verse 15, he turns the tables and talks about a time when the Spirit is poured out, the Spirit of God, when we will see what he's really like and we will receive the benefit of his favor. And then justice will rule in the wilderness, and righteousness in the fertile field. And it brings peace, quietness, and confidence, because now we have allied ourselves with our Creator. We have allowed his Spirit to go to work in our lives and conform us to that character, which is the character of love. And that is the way he designed us to work. So that naturally brings peace, quietness, and confidence. And then we live in safety, quietly at home. We are at rest. Even if the forest should be destroyed, the city torn down, the Lord will greatly bless his people. Chapter 33, a message about Assyria. This one's likely to be considerably more negative, because Isaiah is going to see the Assyrians as mortal enemies of the Israelites, and somebody that he wishes God would do what he thinks God will do. What sorrow awaits you, Assyrians, who have destroyed others, but have never been destroyed yourselves? Footnote A. What sorrow awaits you, O destroyer? The Hebrew text does not specifically name Assyria as the object of the prophecy in this chapter. Well, that's interesting. But it makes sense, given where he's been so far, that we might say, yes, he's talking about Assyria, because Assyria is the one that will be mentioned starting in chapter 36 as the ones who have attacked Judah. You betray others, but you've never been betrayed. When you are done destroying, you will be destroyed. When you are done betraying, you will be betrayed. Now, we've talked about the incident at the city in Judah that Sennacherib was besieging, where 185,000 of his soldiers passed away overnight. But ultimately, that did not bring an end to Assyria. Assyria would last another 100 years or so, but would eventually be shadowed and pushed into insignificance by Babylon, just a ways south of them. But Lord, Be merciful to us, for we have waited for you. Be our strong arm each day and our salvation in times of trouble. Well, we can all identify with that because even if we don't get the kind of physical protection from God that we would like to get because we live in this broken world, we can receive the mental and spiritual comfort of living the way He would like us to live, and then He can be our strong arm and our salvation. And yes, as long as we live in this world, we will have times of trouble. The enemy runs at the sound of your voice. When you stand up, the nations flee. Just as caterpillars and locusts strip the fields and vines, so the fallen army of Assyria will be stripped. And that's again the interpretation they give. I want to read that version here in the NIV just to see how they render it. Your plunder, O nations, is harvested is by young locusts. Like a swarm of locusts, men pounce on it. The Lord is exalted, for He dwells on high. Okay, so the fallen army of Assyria is an interpretation by this version. It just says men. Though the Lord is very great and lives in heaven, He will make Jerusalem His home of justice and righteousness. Zion, I think the footnote says there. Yes. In that day, He will be your sure foundation, providing a rich store of salvation, wisdom, and knowledge. The fear of the Lord will be your treasure. And that's the privilege that we have, is to live with our Creator. When we trust Him, that's our privilege. And He will be our sure foundation. And that willingness to trust God brings with it, as we allow His Spirit entry into our lives, salvation, wisdom, knowledge. The knowledge would be the knowledge of the character of God, which is going to expand and grow as long as we live. And again, our modern translators like to render this fear. And indeed, the Old Testament writers may have used a word that to them meant fear, because that's how they saw things. The respect, the knowledge of the Lord, trust in the Lord will be your treasure. But now, hasn't happened yet, He's saying. Your brave warriors weep in public. Your ambassadors of peace cry in bitter disappointment. Your roads are deserted. No one travels them anymore. The Assyrians, and again, the Hebrew doesn't mention that. That's just their interpretation. The Assyrians have broken their peace treaty and care nothing for the promises they made before witnesses. Footnote C, as in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Masoretic text reads, care nothing for the cities. And let's see, that's in verse 8. So let me read you verse 8 from the NIV. The highways are deserted, no travelers are on the roads, the treaty is broken, its witnesses are despised, no one is respected. So that's how they read that verse 8 in the NIV. The land of Israel wilts in mourning. Lebanon withers with shame. The plain of Sharon is now a wilderness. Bashan and Carmel have been plundered. And these places that are being named here were places perceived by the people as places of natural beauty. Carmel, the mount, and so on. But the Lord says. Now I will stand up. Now I will show my power and might. You Assyrians, NIV renders it just you. You Assyrians produce nothing but dry grass and stubble. Your own breath will turn to fire and consume you. Your people will be burned up completely, like thorn bushes cut down and tossed in a fire. Listen to what I have done, you nations far away, and you that are near, acknowledge my might. The sinners in Jerusalem shake with fear. Terror seizes the godless. Who can live with this devouring fire, they cry? Who can survive this all-consuming fire? Then the prophets answer. Those who are honest and fair, who refuse to profit by fraud, who stay far away from bribes, who refuse to listen to those who plot murder, who shut their eyes to all enticement to do wrong. So he's talking about the kind of people who can live with the devouring or all-consuming fire. Who can survive it? Who can live with it? These people who have molded their lives after the plan of the Creator. Hello, did you want to join?
Is it too late to join you?
No, it's not. Please do.
Can you bring me a thing to drink?
You just want to drink?
I want a napkin, please.
Okay, let me set this up there. I'll be right in there, and you can talk to them while I do that. It'll be just a moment, people.
Hi, everyone. I just woke up. It's 2:07 p.m. and I'm just now waking up. But then I don't sleep at night. I could yawn at you. Well, I play this game on Facebook called Murder's Kingdom. And I'm so far advanced in the game that when they give me a challenge to do, I win it. I have in storage not being used 60,000 energy. Kind of hard to not win.
You were close to 70,000, weren't you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm at 68,836.
Yeah.
The maximum I can get, is 203. But I've got over 68,000.
Yeah. Well, you might be interested in the text that we just got to here.
Is it about abundance?
What?
Is it about abundance?
Well, not exactly.
Here I sit manifesting abundance. I should become an influencer.
We're at Isaiah 33:15.
I'm setting the phone down.
Okay, 14 and 15. And let me read them to you, and then you might want to say something about it. The sinners in Jerusalem shake with fear. Terror seizes the godless. Who can live with this devouring fire, they cry? Who can survive this all-consuming fire?
We have been told that wrong.
Have we?
I remember as a kid going, no, I wasn't a kid. I remember as an adult. Oh, probably around 30. I went to my dad. My dad was considered by the people of the church here, where we're living now, to be someone who was knowledgeable in the Bible and you have questions, you go to him. One of the leaders of the church. And I noticed something and I went to him. I said, how come Aaron's sons were burned up, yet they got pulled out by their clothing, which had been burned up? And his response was, you don't know how to read the Bible. You need to understand that the people who taught us about the Bible, as in the founders of the Adventist Church, were closer to the Lord than you are, and were smarter than you are, and you just need to trust what you've been told.
Yeah, don't ask embarrassing questions.
Ask me plenty of questions. I'll tell you everything you want to know about the Bible, but that said a lot to me. And now I understand that there's more than one kind of fire.
Yeah.
There's lots of things about fire. Passion is considered fire. There's an old rock song called Love Fire.
Mm-hmm. What do you think it says in verse 15? We just read verse 14 there. What do you think it says in verse 15?
I forgot.
Well, I read it here. Let me read it from the NIV so we can go through it again.
He who stands in the fire or something.
He who walks righteously and speaks what is right, who rejects gain from extortion and keeps his hand from accepting bribes, who stops his ears against plots of murder and shuts his eyes against contemplating evil.
Well, that sounds like legalism, but it's not. It's simply you've been through a process that has developed your character to where this is just your nature now. You don't do those kinds of things that it is said because it is repulsive to you to do those kinds of things.
Repugnant, yeah.
You have been through the cleansing fire.
And then in verse 16, these are the ones who will dwell on high. The rocks of the mountains will be their fortress. Food will be supplied to them, and they will have water in abundance. I recognize that. The way that reads in the King James kind of got misused. Maybe if I read it from the King James, you'll recognize it.
Well, it sounds an awful lot like what we were taught about the end of time.
Oh, really? Well, let me read it from the King James. He shall dwell on high, his place of defense shall be the munitions of the rocks. Bread shall be given him, his water shall be sure.
Like I said, it sounds like what we were taught would happen in the time.
Yeah.
Go to the mountains and live in the caves, and God would provide us food by means of birds if necessary.
But it wouldn't be great food, it'd just be bread and water.
Right.
Yeah. But that's not what this is saying. It's talking about those who live with the devouring fire, who live in it, who survive it, because they are all the things that are discussed there in verse 15. And thus they have a fortress that's like the rocks of the mountains. which we read back there in the previous chapter about the mighty rock and a weary land. Reading on, verse 17. Your eyes will see the king in all his splendor, and you will see a land that stretches into the distance. You will think back to this time of terror, asking, where are the Assyrian officers who counted our towers? Where are the bookkeepers who recorded the plunder taken from our fallen city? You will no longer see these fierce, violent people with their strange, unknown language. And again, I want to just check that out from the NIV because, as we've already noted, the term Assyrian does not appear in this chapter in the Hebrew. That's just something that these translators have thrown in there. Your eyes will see the king in his beauty and view a land that stretches afar. In your thoughts you will ponder the former terror. Where is that chief officer? Where is the one who took the revenue? Where is the officer in charge of the towers? You will see these arrogant people no more, those people of an obscure speech with their strange, incomprehensible tongue.
Did you say something about a strange, incomprehensible tongue?
I did.
Is there a solution for that?
Instead, you will see Zion as a place of holy festivals. You will see Jerusalem, a city quiet and secure. It will be like a tent whose ropes are taut and whose stakes are firmly fixed. The Lord will be our mighty one. He will be like a wide river of protection that no enemy can cross, that no enemy ship can sail on. For the Lord is our judge, our lawgiver, and our king. He will care for us and save us. The enemy's sails hang loose on broken masts with useless tackle. Their treasure will be divided by the people of God. Even the lame will take their share. The people of Israel will no longer say, we are sick and helpless, for the Lord will forgive their sins. I had some thoughts there, and then I wanted to get them as soon as I got to the end of the chapter. And
you might come kick me before I fall.
Okay, we're gonna pause the recording here, and we'll be right back.
Oh, I don't mean kick literally. I mean,
I know what she means, so we'll be right back. Okay, that's taken care of. I was trying to think of the ideas I had in mind here as I was reading verses 20 through 24 here. And
I'm not reading them again because I don't know what he's doing.
Well, we read the verse 19 reads, "You'll no longer see these fierce, violent people with their strange, unknown language." Then verse 20 says, "Instead, you will see Zion as a place of holy festivals. You will see Jerusalem, a city quiet and secure. It will be like a tent whose ropes are taut and whose stakes are firmly fixed. The Lord will be our mighty one. He will be like a wide river of protection that no enemy can cross, that no enemy ship can sail upon. For the Lord is our judge, our lawgiver, and our king. He will care for us and save us. The enemy's sails hang loose on broken masts with useless tackle. their treasure will be divided by the people of God. Even the lame will take their share. The people of Israel will no longer say, "We are sick and helpless," for the Lord will forgive their sins.
Maybe look at that through the eyes of somebody who has gone through the active character development rather than the eyes of somebody who lives for themselves.
And I think that's what the prophet, in his limited way, was trying to express. I mean, we read up here about those who are able to live with the all consuming fire. I know what I was thinking. In the wider Christian community, there have been memes that say something, "Where do you want to spend eternity, smoking or non smoking?" Well, when you stop to read this and understand what the fire is, these people who have had their characters transformed are the ones who live with the fire. And it's been an unfortunate tendency of Christianity to look at the fire as hell and something to be avoided, when in fact, while the fire destroys sin, it supports and energizes the righteous. Anyway.
Well, another thing about if we look at it through the lens of our culture, if you live the way you think you're supposed to live, therefore you expect God to zap your enemy.
Well, yeah, and that's.
Let me finish. Well, for one thing, he's not going to do that. Because if he were to go around zapping enemies, there wouldn't be anybody left. Everybody's got enemies. You're somebody's enemy. But so he'd have to zap you. But if you're following the Lord with the idea that karma's gonna get them, and you're not really gonna feel satisfied to sit back and see somebody get destroyed. When God puts you through the process of character development, that's one of the most painful processes you have to go through. I went through. I used to belong to a 12-step program, and it was not alcoholics. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't use alcohol. I don't like alcohol. I don't like being drunk. I want nothing to do with it. But I was in a 12-step program for something else. And I took somebody with me that also needed it for the same reason I needed it. And when we left, she was upset with me and refused to go again because she didn't like the way it made her feel.
for me, it was a place I could go and experience love from all the people that were there because
Mm-hmm.
they had been through what I had been through. And they were admitting it and they were accepting the healing that came by experiencing the love and acceptance from everybody that was there. But the person that I took with me just refused to recognize that and refused to go back and have anything further to do with it. And when she got home, she went straight to her habit, which I will admit happened to be eating, called Overeaters Anonymous. When this lady died, she admitted that she wasn't ready to die. And sometimes think about her. Did she experience the healing fire? Or did she not? It's not my place to know that.
Right. Well, we pay close attention to those verses there in chapter 33 because to us they help us place the fire mentioned in other parts of the Bible
Oh, what I was going to say
in context.
is that one of the hardest thing you can do is to go through the healing fire because you have to face what kind of person you are, what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And when you come out of it on the other side, things are a lot different.
Now, let me just say, as we go into chapter 34, this is going to be a particularly negative chapter. And one of the ways that we can understand it is the same way that we understood some of the passages in the book of Psalms, particularly the "Please do this to my enemies" chapters, because this is going to talk about the fate of God's enemies.
Yeah, I used to beg God, do something to my ex. Please. I want to see you destroy my ex. But now I realize the best thing that can happen to my ex is for him to go through the process of character development and the life that spoke to him. I was humbled because I was upset. And I told him I had left the church, and he started counseling me and asking me the kinds of questions that I would ask him now.
Mm-hmm.
He started pointing out to me that I don't remember what he said, but it was the kinds of things that would lead to wonder as this guy started going through character development himself, which I certainly hope he has.
Yeah. Isaiah chapter 34. Come here and listen, O nations of the earth. Let the world and everything in it hear my words. For the Lord is enraged against the nations. His fury is against all their armies. Now, we understand that anger per se is not sin. It's how we express it that's problematic. And the Lord does get angry. He gets angry at the things that destroy his creatures. And while Isaiah would render that against the nations and their armies and would write it in that sense, we, I think, need to understand it as the enemies being those things that keep us separated from him, that keep us believing lies about him. Those are the things that destroy us, and those are the things against which God is angry. For the Lord is enraged against the nations, his fury is against all their armies. He will completely destroy them, dooming them to slaughter. Now I wonder, footnote A, if that's going to refer to the, yes, and I forget what the term is right now, but the irrevocable giving of things or persons to the Lord, often by totally destroying them. And it says it would be the same thing in verse 34, in chapter 34, verse 5. He will totally destroy them. He will give them over to slaughter, is how the NIV reads it. And then it has this footnote. The Hebrew term refers to the irrevocable giving over of things or persons to the Lord, often by totally destroying them, also in verse 5. And I used to know what that term was, and right now I'm unable to bring it to mind, but there is such a Hebrew term. It does appear from time to time, including twice here in this chapter. He will completely destroy them, dooming them to slaughter. Their dead will be left unburied, and the stench of rotting bodies will fill the land. The mountains will flow with their blood. The heavens above will melt away and disappear like a rolled up scroll. The stars will fall from the sky like withered leaves from a grapevine or shriveled figs from a fig tree. And you may be aware that this text sometimes gets quoted as describing this earth just before the second coming. And when my sword has finished its work in the heavens, it will fall upon Edom, the nation I have marked for destruction. The sword of the Lord is drenched with blood and covered with fat, with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of rams prepared for sacrifice. Yes, the Lord will offer a sacrifice in the city of Bozrah. He will make a mighty slaughter in Edom. Even men as strong as wild oxen will die, the young men alongside the veterans. The land will be soaked with blood, and the soil enriched with fat. For it is the day of the Lord's revenge, the year when Edom will be paid back for all it did to Israel. Footnote B, or to Zion, all right. The streams of Edom will be filled with burning pitch, and the ground will be covered with fire. This judgment on Edom will never end. The smoke of its burning will rise forever. Where have we read that before? That is a phrase that John borrowed when he wrote the book of Revelation. The land will lie deserted from generation to generation. No one will live there anymore. It will be haunted by the desert owl and the screech owl, the great owl and the raven. Footnote C, the identification of some of these birds is uncertain. Okay. For God will measure that land carefully. He will measure it for chaos and destruction. It will be called the land of nothing, and all its nobles will soon be gone. Thorns will overrun its palaces. Nettles and thistles will grow in its forts. The ruins will become a haunt for jackals and a home for owls. Desert animals will mingle there with hyenas, their howls filling the night. Wild goats will bleat at one another among the ruins, and night creatures will come there to rest. Footnote E, Lilith, possibly a reference to the mythical demon of the night. That's interesting. One of the NIV says about that. That's verse 14. Desert creatures will meet with hyenas, and wild goats will bleat to each other. There the night creatures will also repose and find for themselves places of rest. So they just use the term night creatures. This version is chosen to reveal that the Hebrew word Lilith is used there and suggest that it might be a reference to a mythical demon of the night.
There's a reference to something like that in a book that your mother read. And I remember your mother had to read that book with a dictionary. Now I remember one of the words she came across was mentioning was the word superannuated.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh.
Annuated being full of years. Superannuated being very, very full of years.
Right. She mentioned something that was in that book, and I don't remember much about it except she mentioned this being that they believe a demon would come and look on women during the night and do things to arouse the woman, cause the woman to have a wet dream, an erotic dream. And it would be a demon, a fallen angel that was.
Well, I just looked this up and it's up on the screen. In Hebrew, Lilith is spelled, and it gives the actual Hebrew letters, Lilit. Wild. It is etymologically rooted in the Hebrew word for night, Layla, symbolizing darkness and mystery. In Jewish folklore, she is best known as the rebellious figure who was Adam's first wife. And that's a Hebrew thing. You may not have heard of that before, but yeah. The name is ultimately derived from the ancient Sumerian and Akkadian terms Lil, wind and spirit, and Lilitu, a female night demon. In the Hebrew Bible, the word Lilith appears only once in the book of Isaiah, describing the desolate ruins of Edom.
Fraser Crane White, who caused him so much trouble, was named Lilith.
Well, the writers probably borrowed from this Jewish mythology.
And they have.
And did you hear how it was pronounced?
I didn't understand it.
Lilit.
Lily?
Well, there's a T at the end of the second one, but yeah.
Oh, really?
Her nieces, and to some extent her brother and her brother's children.
It started with my cousins.
Was it?
And it was my cousin Byron couldn't say Vivian. So she told him he could call her Lee. Because her name is Vivian Lee.
Right.
But one of my cousins started calling her Lily, and that stuck to her.
Yep.
Everyone called her Lily.
All her son's children called her Lily.
My son called her Lily.
Did he?
Grown call her Lily.
Okay. Well, anyway.
Every everybody calls her Lily.
Okay, we were reading verse 14. The night creatures come there to rest. There the owl will make her nest and lay her eggs. She will hatch her young and cover them with her wings. And the buzzards will come, each one with its mate. Search the book of the Lord and see what he will do. Not one of these birds and animals will be missing, and none will lack a mate. For the Lord has promised this. His Spirit will make it all come true. He has surveyed and divided the land and deeded it over to those creatures. They will possess it forever from generation to generation. And while this is intended by the prophet to be a depiction of destruction, what he ends up saying is that God provides for all his creatures. And now the mood changes. Chapter 35. This one is probably quite familiar to many of you. Even the wilderness and desert will be glad in those days. The wasteland will rejoice and blossom with spring crocuses. Yes, there will be an abundance of flowers and singing and joy. The deserts will become as green as the mountains of Lebanon, as lovely as Mount Carmel or the plain of Sharon. There the Lord will display his glory, the splendor of our God. Now, I'm just going to read that as King James because that's how a lot of us learned it. The wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose.
Remind me to say something when we're done.
Go ahead.
Well, no, back to talking about my mom's name, Lily. I was just remembering there's a Final Fantasy game that has a monster called Vivian.
Yeah, well, I think you'll find that there are a number of games that use Lilith as the name for a monster, too.
Well, I'm not recognizing that.
Anyway.
And my dad wanted me to break into Final Fantasy, whichever one it was, and change the name of that monster. Like, I can't do that. I thought I was the one that did that, but I wasn't.
With this news, strengthen those who have tired hands and encourage those who have weak knees. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong and do not fear. For your God is coming to destroy your enemies. He is coming to save you. Well, how does God save us? By destroying those things that are our enemies that have separated us from him. And sometimes that's the lies that other people have told us about him.
But he doesn't destroy them.
He doesn't destroy the people, he destroys the lies.
What destroys them is if they refuse to go through the healing process.
Right. Because if you don't get healed, your disease is going to take you. It's that simple. How does that put that in the King James, by the way? Be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. Even God with a recompense, he will come and save you. It's interesting that I actually like the King James wording a little better there, because we know from earlier in the book of Isaiah what is God's vengeance?
The act of healing.
The act of healing, to purge away our dross. Just for the fun of it, let's see what the NIV does with that verse. Your God will come. He will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you. Yeah. So, destroy your enemies can be understood there to the extent we understand what the enemies are. They're not other people. And when he comes, he will open the eyes of the blind and unplug the ears of the deaf. The lame will leap like a deer, and those who cannot speak will sing for joy. That's a line that gets handed to, I think, the alto voice in Handel's Messiah, in a recitative. Then shall the eyes of the blind be open, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap like an hart or a deer, and the tongue of the dumb shall sing. And that leads into the aria, he shall lead his flock, which is taken from a little bit later in Isaiah. We won't get there tonight, and possibly tomorrow night. Next week we would get there, because that's when we would expect to get chapter 40, which is where that comes from. Springs will gush forth in the wilderness, and streams will water the wasteland. The parched ground will become a pool, and springs of water will satisfy the thirsty land. Marsh grass and reeds and rushes will flourish where desert jackals once lived. This next verse is kind of interesting. And we'll read how they put it here. We'll read it out of the NIV, and I'm going to read it out of King James, because there are different ways to interpret what's written here. And a great road will go through that once deserted land. It will be named the Highway of Holiness. Evil-minded people will never travel on it. It will be only for those who walk in God's ways. Fools will never walk there. Now, let's see. I wanted to read the NIV before I get to the King James. And a highway will be there. It will be called the Way of Holiness. The unclean will not journey on it. It will be for those who walk in that way. Wicked fools will not go about on it, and so on. Now, and I don't know if this is because the authors of the King James, the translators, weren't clear, if they were writing in language that's not clear to us, or just what it is, but here's how that verse reads in the King James. See if it perhaps gives you a different idea. And an highway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the Way of Holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for those, the wayfaring men, though fools, shall not err therein. And that opens up a very different possibility for understanding it. The way of holiness does not make way for the unclean, but wayfaring men, even some who might be considered fools, once they walk that highway, they no longer err. And the English doesn't read sensibly according to us. But it shall be for those, the wayfaring men, though fools, shall not err therein. Well, all right. Lions will not lurk along its course, nor any other ferocious beasts. There will be no other dangers. Only the redeemed will walk on it. Those who have been ransomed by the Lord will return. And the language we're about to read gets repeated later in this book. They will enter Jerusalem singing, or Zion, crowned with everlasting joy. Sorrow and mourning will disappear, and they will be filled with joy and gladness. And again, I want to read that out of these other two versions at the close of the chapter. And the ransomed of the Lord will return. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. And you may be familiar with the song that more or less follows the wording of the King James there. And the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. So, while chapter 34 discussed the destruction and suggests that that destruction would fall on Edom, which refers, of course, to the descendants of Esau, then chapter 35 looks forward to a time of restoration. And it, in some ways, mirrors what's in chapter 34 when it talks about the desert creatures that would inhabit the land. Here we still have a highway for the redeemed, a highway of holiness. And I see, by looking at the clock over there, that we have filled up our time, and we have reached chapter 35, which was kind of what I was hoping to do. So, chapter 36 is the beginning of the historical section of the book. It tells the story that we've read before. We'll cover that and maybe some other things next week when we continue our study of the book of Isaiah. So, we invite you to join us then, and until then, we say goodbye and God bless.